Hi class and welcome to Module 2, Telling Stories. In this module we'll talk about narration. So the objectives in this module are to arrange a narrative story by organizing thoughts from a personal perspective and utilizing the writing process that we did in Module 1. We'll want to illustrate knowledge of essay structure by implementing an effective thesis, adjusting topic sentences with body paragraphs, and completing the beginning and ending paragraphs to an essay, including topic and summarizing thoughts. So we'll also be using MLA in this module, and we will make sure that we're using correct sentence structure so that we can unify paragraphs for coherence. So those are the objectives. So let's take a look at what a narrative essay is and what its purposes are. So narration, the art of storytelling. It is a powerful method to engage readers. Quite often you see preachers use narration to begin their sermons, or you see politicians use narrations when they're speaking to the public. Narrations can instruct, inform, as well as entertain people as they do in movies and books. They are actually a valuable skill to acquire because it really can help relate a message or a higher purpose to what you're telling through the story. A story can help people understand a lesson learned, and it makes sense when you tell it through a story. So the process and purpose of a narrative. Your story, when you write your essay, it has to have a purpose. And what I mean by that is the purpose will actually be the guiding principle beyond with your story. So as an example, I tell a story about when I was a child, an adult lied to me. So the purpose of me telling the story is to prove the point that adults aren't perfect. That was sort of a life lesson learned as a child, that you think adults are all honest and tell everything truthfully, but once you realize that they're not perfect either. So the purpose is getting that across, that when you realize that adults weren't perfect. So that's your purpose, and then you tell the story in a way that makes that make sense to the reader. So the person that is telling the story is the narrator, which I'm sure you've heard of before. We have narrators in movies and then even in books, and sometimes it's from the first person and sometimes it's from the third person, and sometimes the narrator's trustworthy and sometimes they're not, but they determine the angle in which the story is told. So the two of the essays that you'll be reading this week that are in the lesson are Champion of the World and The Most Important Day. Both of these are told from the first person, which is most often the way it's told, but it can be told from a third person perspective. For instance, if you're telling someone else's story and that purpose, that, they realize that maybe, someone had drowned, and so you're telling it through someone else's story, or a car accident or something. So most are first person, but it can be told through third person. So the one thing that you want to make sure you pay attention to is also your verb tense. It can be told in the present, but usually it's in the past, and the best stories are told in the past because you're usually reflecting back on that experience. And again, when you read Champion of the World and The Most Important Day, you'll see that it is told in the past tense, quite a few years in the past tense. So Maya Angelou was actually talking about something that happened to her when she was a very young child, as well as Helen Keller in The Most Important Day. So just pay attention to the verb tense. So what do you want to emphasize when you're telling your narrative, when you're telling your story? You want to, show the discovery of details, how things came to be. You want to determine if you want to create one scene where something happened, or if you want to summarize a series of events. You want to talk through dialogue possibly to express ideas or explain how someone in the story is feeling. Since you're telling it from the first person, sometimes it's difficult to get the message across, so you tell it through dialogue. And of course, you use descriptions, you use a lot of adjectives. Say if it's a red pickup truck that's beat up and it's got, crumbled in bumper, or if it's, a beautiful, pristine pool, whatever those are. But use descriptions so that it becomes more live and vivid. And of course, you know, who and what and where, give the details, tell when it happened, why it happened, and how it happened. So, think of stories that you've heard over the years and what makes them good. And, it's the details. So make sure you emphasize those. So your organization, it can be done in a couple of different ways. Chronological order, from start to finish can be probably the most easiest method, but you can also use flashbacks to reflect back on something that happened. Just make sure your purpose is your guide. Make sure that, whatever it is you're trying to get across that purpose, those decisions that you make with the how you write it go along with that. And next thing that's really important is to use transitions to mark a change in time. Sometimes in narrations it can be difficult to understand when something happened. So when you're telling it, make sure that you're specific about it happened 7 years before, or it happened moments earlier, or happened before sunset if you're telling something that happened in a day. So just make sure you mark those changes so that it's easy for the reader to understand. And lastly, you want to make sure that you focus on verbs. Narration depends heavily on verbs to clarify and enliven events. You want to use strong verbs, verbs that, make an impact on the reader. For example, well, I've got the sentences here. The first sentence, the wind made a noise. And then the second sentence is the wind roared outside. You can obviously tell that they're saying the same thing, but it's much more vivid when the wind roared. So think about your verbs when you're writing and make sure, try to avoid using the verb to make or verb to be. Use action verbs or ones that give descriptions so that you know that it slowly happened, or it happened so fast you barely remember it. But most important, be consistent with your verb tense so that when you are telling the story, you don't switch from present to past to a different verb tense. So just be consistent with that. So good luck this week and good luck with writing this essay. And please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the discussion board.
Hi class, and welcome to Module 2. During this module, we will actually start working on narration, and we'll be working on this during weeks 3, 4, and 5. So as you can see from the screen, our module objectives are to arrange a narrative story by organizing thoughts from a personal perspective and utilizing the writing process. You will illustrate knowledge of essay structure by implementing an effective thesis, adjusting topic sentences with body paragraphs, completing beginning and ending paragraphs to introduce topics and summarize thoughts. You will also use your MLA template to format this essay and use correct sentence structure and unify paragraph.